Now let's go to our question and answer session. Paul, actually, I'd like to start the first question. So you ran through, I mean, again, that's over 70 years of history. And it looks like a lot of, not surprisingly, a lot of evidence and mythology have become mixed together over that time, right? And
yeah.
you know, you have real photographs, you have stuff that's been edited on the internet, and we're not sure about the reliability of any of it. Do you think that there's a way to assign credibility to these various pieces of evidence, I guess, to help identify what's useful, you know?
This reminds me of my past existence, where people were talking about Russian systems and advanced technologies. And you can make all the guesses you want in the world. But then when these guys got a piece of hardware, they changed the views and they came right on what's going on. We have to look at this material. The problem here is that these guys are dealing with such a high level of security that they can't talk about the problems and they don't know how to solve it. The people that don't have the clearances have the knowledge on how to possibly find the solution. So they cannot find a marriage between the two of them. And that's ridiculous. Now, I remember reading something saying that there's a 9-level classification. 2 is confidential. 3 is secret. 4 is top secret. 6 is top secret intel. And gee, that's as far as I went. What's up there in 9, God knows. So this is a bad problem. And the wrong people are working with the good effort, or the good things, and there's no way around it. Now, the other thing is that, thank God, the other nations feel the same way, same stupid way. And nobody's going to get ahead on that basis. But if somebody breaks out there, we're going to be in a world of hurt.
Well, thank you. So let me go to Jeremy Reese next. I will ask him to unmute. Sir?
Hey, sorry about that. I meant to click the unmute button on the different thing because I was talking to my live audience, to the live chat. We were just trying to I was trying to get people to click the like button and hit subscribe. Paul, thank you for joining us with that presentation. I noticed a lot of clips from that. I recognized a lot of the stuff that was covered there from my own research. A number of pics that are just, definitely look like CGI or others that were discovered as fakes or proven as fakes by a number of researchers. That USS Trepang photo with the target balloons and all that stuff, and also the Russians. The Russians actually had a blimp that was disguised to look like a UFO. There's been a lot of disinformation that's gone around on both sides. A lot of the Hannibal stuff and the Nazi flying saucer stuff came from like Italian propaganda and post like Nazi survivalist story after the fact. And I just wanted to, we're going to try and get some questions from the live chat going here and stuff, if anyone wants any, but like a lot of people were confused because they're like, oh, this is like a propulsion engineering, cutting edge, technologies and engineering conference. They thought we were talking about like space age metamaterials and stuff. And we're now mixing all this mythology and these a lot of pictures of UFOs that have been, thoroughly, discredited and debunked over the years. And I one of them that was actually just, you could clearly see it was an X-wing fighter, like photoshopped from Star Wars. so some racy stuff that you put together there. And
Give me a break. Go ahead.
I don't know if some of it was just to try to get the point across or what, but but I just feel like it's I don't see any actionable intelligence that's leading us towards, building something or what to build. This is kind of just like an overview of UFOs and stuff. So I don't know. I just
Can I answer that question?
yeah, I'd like to. What's that? I really like the Einstein thing at the beginning, but what sense does this serve at a conference like this?
One of the arguments that people were saying was, like I said, there are humans from the future, and nobody else can do it. And that's why I went through the biology activity. Regarding propulsion, the sphere constellation offers the avenue. Now, we had seen strange things happening with the Morningstar energy box, and I gave a presentation on that that demonstrated there was anomalies. It lost 7% of its weight. And Searle made lots of comments about his system. Now, people may have the intention of deliberately providing disinformation about some of these things. So you have to be careful about that. And it's not, like I said, you have to see something. You gotta, knock on the tires or hit the metal, and then satisfy you. There's nothing wrong with that. But you've got to recognize the fact too that maybe there's something in there. And you mentioned the balloons. The Russians would use the test range balloons to shoot down RVs. And what they would do is they would just look at the azimuth and elevation, and they would fire an ABM after it. So the possibility of using this fakery, it exists. It's obvious. You can do it. But the other question is that you end up with some systems that are clean, like that when I did that picture I had for the airliner, and you look at the stuff coming out of Tic Tac, are you suggesting that it's not real? Okay, I can understand that too.
I never suggested that it's not real. I have, I said some of the stuff that you're mixing in is definitely not real. The Tic Tac thing is another matter of debate. But again, it's like answering the question is how is this going to help your kids and your grandkids get to the stars?
I would look at it from the perspective of going back to doing work like the Nazi Bell, as well as the sphere constellation approach. I'd love to have done that. Okay.
You think that should be our next, we talked about this on the last conference. You had some interesting things to say about, try mixing the barium titanate with the ceramic. And I did I asked some of my chemistry friends about doing that. And they said that barium titanate was a ceramic, and it wouldn't mix with mercury because of it's just not soluble. So we're going to have to work on some ways that we can get that to happen. And I'm not quite sure the physics of what we're trying to test for.
What I'm saying is don't worry about it dissolving. I'm not suggesting dissolving. Keep it in there as grains.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm interested in that. That is something where I can see, like us discussing, where an experiment where we can actually test some of this stuff, because a lot of that, gravity amplifier stuff. Well, how do I build this? What are the material? Where are the Nazi documents that show like a material? And what I've tried to do is follow the scientific literature, through what was being published and what were the papers. The earliest stuff that I can find on rotating stuff is like twister theory with Penrose back in '67. So
well, let me add a factor here. I had a conversation about 20 years ago by Ning Lee, and she told me we were arguing about Delnikov's stuff, and she said, none of it's new. I said, what do you mean none of it's new? It's all from the Nazis. I said, what do you mean? Her father, Delnikov's father was a soldier who went through Der ISIS, and he packed up as many blueprints as he could. And that's what he spent 25 years to read and put together for his experiments. Okay, so how do you look at that? Well, again, if you don't touch it, the other point is that the Russians apparently destroyed everything that was in there. That was a way of covering up whether it exists. And you don't know if somebody's trying to tell you something for information or disinformation.
Right. I mean, the only reason I haven't done the Mercury experiments is just because it's so dangerous. And
oh yeah, yeah. Well, the story about the Nazi Bell was that people were dying from radiation, and apparently it wasn't radiation per se; it was chemical toxic reactions from the mercury. So, you got to look at these things.
Paul, if I could jump in really quick, one of the things that I know, and again, I've known you for many years, you've mentioned the Gulf breeze sightings to me several times. What is the significance of the Gulf breeze sightings? And that's the one where you mentioned the toroidal shape. And it looks, if I understand correctly, you'd said that several different people captured that on different cameras, and yet they showed similar toroidal shapes on the bottom of these craft.
Somehow, this is impacting the electromagnetic field around the craft, and it does what they want it to do. Now, the question is, how could you control it? You could probably, like a helicopter, you have a plate there that changes the blades, and it tilts the blades this way or it tilts them that way, and it changes the pitch. You got those 3 or 4 spheres. You may change the orientation with it, with the center body. You may have another field in there that it acts against, and who knows? That would be a way of doing it. But it's all theoretical. You got to put something together, and talk is cheap. And I'm not saying I disagree with what was said, but I don't agree either. We're without doing any hardcore research activities to look at this, and as well as you saw all the numbers in there from all these vehicles that crashed all over the place. There's got to be something there to learn. If there's that histology that says, hey, went through this 2 years to do this, and then another 2 years, a year to do this, it tells you that the people doing it are not very competent, or they're incompetent in what they're doing. And I've seen a lot of things that way in my life, where people are giving certain assignments that are beyond their intellect.
Yeah. Well, Paul, let me go to Eric Hermanson next. Eric, go ahead, sir.
Hello. To me, there seems to be a disconnect that Paul brought up, where there's this theory that the government has access to maybe as little as one alien artifact, or as many as a fleet of crashed spacecraft. And so that is the problem. If those things are in an inventory, then of course the government needs to start allowing responsible parties to go in and see if they can help figure it out. I don't know what to believe, because right now I don't believe it. And so that there's a disconnect there. So people talk about that as if it's true, when it may not at all, in fact, be true. On the second real quick thing on disinformation, I read an article and it got me thinking. Submarines are very, very difficult to detect, and that's dangerous when they carry nuclear warhead. So I'm thinking some of this might be where a country, no matter what country it is trying to lure out enemy submarines by, making the country think that UFOs are interested in their nuclear facilities, and then they'll fly something over the ocean territorial waters of that country, hoping that that country will send a submarine out to help investigate. And then while that submarine's out there, country A is then trying to find that submarine, knowing it might be there, and that will improve their ability to detect submarines. And that's one of the, maybe the disinformation ploys where maybe Russia or China is sending these craft up and making them appear to behave in amazing ways, when in fact it's something different, and they're just trying to get our submarines to come out, and then they're trying to find them, and if they can, then they've made progress on the methodology they need to use to find our submarines.
The pictures that I showed you on the water were from the 60s. I've seen them in the 90s, and I've seen him in going in a UFO crashing into a river. So it just depends on where you want to be. And like I said, I felt I put in too much material as it is, that I could have, put in some more stuff like this. Now, what you're saying about the submarines, yeah, you'll do whatever you can do to get the other side confused or to determine detectability and so on. Like right now, the Russians would love to have a S-400 looking at a F-35 flying by. It's the way it goes. It's games you type of play with each other. And what you hope is that somebody thinks about those things and use that kind of information and go from there. There was the Iraq War. The Russians said, "Hey, we'd like to help you out in this war. We'd like to provide a Russian AWACS over there." And the response was, well, why does he want the Russian AWACS? He wants to see the F-117 flying out there, get a good picture of it. The response was, well, rather than doing that, why don't you give us an SA-12 air defense missile system? And then the Russians backed off and everything. So people play those kind of games with each other. And yeah, you just hope that somebody uses them. And if it impacts at the higher level, I guess that the movie, The Hunt for Red October, when the guy acts like, "You lost your submarine?" That kind of crap happens all the time. So you just hope that people are wise enough to do things like that.
Okay, well, Paul, thank you. Let me go to Mark next. Mark has been patiently waiting, and then we'll go to Sean and Michael after that. So Mark, go ahead, sir.
Okay, first of all, I love the presentation. Lots of pictures, and I definitely agree that if you, 1 second, if you're going to look around on the fringes of science for things like flying saucers and anti-gravity, you're definitely going to come across a lot of disinformation, because it is the holy grail of science, and it's probably something very simple that we could have done 70 years ago, if you're to believe all the stories of the secret space program and all that stuff and the ARV. Therefore, misinformation is key. There's also misinformation of real information too. And this is something that I felt happened with the Billy Meyer case, because you brought up Billy Meyer's flying saucers. there was a guy, Karl Koroff, who Jeremy Reese actually had a debate with him. I don't know how much of a debate it actually was about Billy Meyer and about some other cases. Karl Koroff is like a professional debunker, and he went down there and actually made those small models in order to take pictures of them. His book was the first book I read on the Billy Meyer case, and it actually convinced me more that there was something there. Unfortunately, Billy Meyer never really gave us much information in terms of how the craft worked, which was my main concern. But I did notice one thing. He said that the craft can travel up to the speed of light, and then it has a certain shield around it that protects it from the relativistic effects. And then when they want to go like true interstellar, they turn off that shield, and all of the matter in the craft turns into energy. It like transcends dimensions, and then they're able to go to any place in time that they want. And apparently a lot of people got lost in the early stages of perfecting that technology, and they have to do it like several hours out into several light hours out, so that they don't move planets around. It's just something interesting to think about. Also, the ARV is the basis of many of the experiments that I'm working on. And I think that you really have to believe that something is real, that something is possible, in order to start trying to build it. So you got to start somewhere. If you're going to be wrong, it's fine, because then you just learn from that and you move forward.
Well, basically, all I can say is that the things that were most unusual about Meyer was that he had more than one or two spacecraft together. And seeing another UFO with the two of them, it's rare, very rare. The only thing I could find other than that was a picture in 1952 with the guy with the baseball game. So that would raise some questions in my mind, plus the fact that the pictures were so clear. When he mentioned the things that you're suggesting, that requires some thought. Now, you're talking about the Broglie effect, where you're changing energy into matter waves, and then back to Einstein, where we're getting E equals mc squared. It's easier to move energy than it is to move mass. You get over that hump where you don't need infinite mass to do it. That might be the way to do it. But that's great theoretically. And how do you do it? Now, you mentioned that I guess I lost the bubble for a while, part of old age. The point is that you got to do these experiments. And what I suspect you guys are going to do is you're going to have some level of emotion and motivation to care what you're doing. The reason I'm mentioning that is that I have seen too many replications of equipment where they said, hey, this guy has an idea, an experiment, but I cannot reproduce it, therefore it sucks. And I probably mentioned the one about Podelnikov, where he's spinning a 13-inch disc for 3,000 RPM, and somebody is duplicating his experiment with a disc that's 4 inches in diameter at 800 RPM. And oh, look, it don't work. Therefore, this experiment is wrong. That individual also looked at one of these German circuits that came out of World War II. And, oh, it doesn't work. But everything you read about all of this stuff, every single one of them has that system in the UFOs. So when you do something, you got to care about it.
You got to do it right.
If you don't care about it, it's not going to work.
Okay. Well, let me jump back in. Let me go to Sean next. I should apologize. Folks are piling up with questions. So, Sean, let me go to you next.
Yeah, I have a question I would like to actually thank you for bringing this up too. once a craft travels at speeds past Mach 22, they're thrown into space, and a lot of people I don't think realize that. Do you have any more information on that? Like, could you explain that in a little more detail?
No. I just heard the numbers that somebody was talking about, and I said, that's orbital speed almost. And hold on, you're doing that on the ground. I've been involved with the ablation analysis on the Apollo, so it comes back from the moon and everywhere. Hey, everything is great at high altitude. Well, it's not great at high altitudes because of low density, but if you're at low places, low levels of altitude, man, you're going to get burned up like you wouldn't believe. And something has got to be going on that we don't understand. And I'd like to argue that it's magnetohydrodynamics, but I'm beginning to wonder if it's electrohydrodynamics instead, or electrodynamics per se. And
I thought it was MHD and EHD at the same time. I think it's like a combination where they work in conjunction to each other and then therefore manipulate what they have to do.
Well, the thing is, when we deal with nonlinear problems, we break it up into linear pieces. And that might not be the right idea. And what I'm suggesting here is, like I said to you earlier, we will have to look at this with multiple fields, electric and magnetic. The one with the ARV, that one ring over there, and then the stacks of stuff that is rotating with an AC system, and that one ring being a DC system. Hey, what's going on? And the problem here is that I'm disgusted about this because all these other aliens are able to do it and we can't. What are we missing? What's wrong? Are we looking at this too simplistic by saying, hey, I'm just going to have an understanding of one field and not have the courage to look at a nonlinear problem? That's wrong. We got to look at the full bore problem and be careful of our assumptions along the way and minimize them as much as possible.
Paul, let me jump in and go to Michael Boyd, who has been patiently waiting, sir, and I'll ask you to unmute. And Michael, thank you for joining us. This is Michael's first conference with us.
Hello. Hi, Paul.
Hi.
I'm curious. I have a little experience with studying the UAP phenomena. And one of the things that I feel uncomfortable about in your presentation is a lot of the visual data that you provided isn't authenticated. And so what I'm curious to know, I'm sure you're aware of the 3 UAP videos that the Navy declassified.
Yeah.
Are you aware of any other authenticated evidence like that?
I guess all I say is the pictures are photographs.
Well, photographic evidence,
Yeah, we
video
can argue about that. But what you're saying is
where the person or the organization that owns it authenticates it. Basically, those films were released before the Navy would own up to them being theirs, and then eventually they decided a couple years later to do so, and at that point it became authenticated by some authority. So, like, if I went into court, I could use that as evidence to talk to a judge about this subject.
I made a judgment.
Do that.
I made a judgment that I could not include everything. And there's a picture I'm thinking of right now. And the picture is, there's a craft on the ground. Mm-hmm. And there's a very fuzzy craft on the ground. By fuzzy, I mean transparent.
Okay.
And there are pictures where you see something going along and then it's gone.
Right. I'm a little confused by your answer. I think what I'm asking is where somebody was there, like the person who took the picture.
Yeah.
Did they sign something saying, hey, this is my picture?
Bruce Cornett's been doing that for decades.
Because that's the kind of evidence you need to actually do analysis. Unless you know the source of the data, it's kind of
like I said, Bruce Cornett did that, and I included some of his stuff in there. He's got books on it, as well as presentations for a long period of time. And as far as I can tell, he's honest. We were talking about looking at these things with determining if we need to understand the magnetic field about these vehicles. And somebody laid out an idea, and he's looking into that too. So he spent a lot of time in New York State. There are a lot of other people that do this also, but I try to stay away from that stuff because I'm concerned about building a propulsion device, and the enigmatic stuff can pull you apart. For example, I didn't say anything about hybridization. I didn't say anything about abductions. And, you know, you could go off the field way out there, and it's not going to help you coming up with a propulsion system.
Okay. Well, Michael, thank you. Let me meet you back out. Let me go back to Jeremy Reese, and then after that we will go to Robert O'Keefe. So Jeremy, go ahead, sir.
Yes, Paul, you had mentioned something about Ning Lee, and I was curious to know more about that statement. And I know that she's had quite a bit of her own theories of how this rotating superconductor experiment that NASA did would work to produce, anti-gravity. And I know that there's a number of experiments that, we can draw analogies with that to the Henry Wallace patents and the GE General Electric experiments that were done in the 1960s. There's a paper on it by Bryce Dewitt that I found from 1966 on the drag of a rotating superconductor. And as I mentioned, that Penrose paper in 1967 on twistor theory. But do you know of any other theories? And can you mention anything more about Ning Lee or any other theories?
Ning Lee was a friend of mine. I think she wanted me to go to work for her. And I talked to her when her stuff came out. She had every country wanted to get hold of her to do her thing. They even had a third level ambassador from Japan sitting at her door one day. So people were telling her, whatever you want, we'll do it for you. You want a research facility, a production facility, just come with us and we'll do it. So I had tried to convince her to stay in America. I tried to convince her 3 times not to go to China. So this tends to give you a feeling of how close we were. Okay. Regarding that experiment that they did, they ended up with a 12-inch disc, and Robertson will tell you about this too. It ended up with a crack. So they couldn't run it for thousands of RPM because there'll be pieces all over the place. Also, when people looked at the experiment, Vedelnikov told them what they were doing, and rather than continuing asking about details, they ran off and said, "Oh, I know exactly what this guy did." Well, what it turns out is that he had a plate on the bottom and a lip, and the superconducting material was in there. So the lip gave it some security about the material to minimize their cracks. And there's another way of doing it without even using revolution. But we'll talk about that maybe some other time. So does that answer your question about my interactions with Ning Lee?
Yeah, that was great.
Well, also let me mention that when I did the high frequency gravity wave conference, she and Bob Baker and I were the co-chairs. Actually, I was the chairman, and I did that as a favor, shall we say, just to give them credibility.
I also wanted to point out to Mike Boyd that the Lonnie Zamora incident was another pretty well documented official. Like there was like a police officer involved. It's one of the more credible cases out there if you're looking for other cases, and that if you're new to UFO studies and stuff. And thank you for that. How about the any other theories that you know of that could be possibly potentially related to this rotating superconductor or that rotating Mercury effect? Any you mentioned Schauberger, any other theories that people can look up for the physics, and can you maybe say anything about that?
Well, I don't believe that the idea that Witkowski said that this device for the cage was there, but rather than this was to support a water tower. I don't know if you're familiar with the cage.
That's the fly trap, right?
Yeah. I don't believe that aspect at all.
No, it looks like a water tower support.
Yeah.
And
so you have to go into this stuff. You got to spend some time to look at it. There's certain feelings, there's certain data that the Germans actually may have had a nuclear explosion in the Baltics. And it caused a EMP strike that blacked out a city for 3 days. And people are trying to look at that stuff and wondering what's going on. So what I'm saying is that there's a lot of information in there that we don't know about. And you're going to have to burn up time to look at it. And the question is, do you have that time to do it?
No, but we could burn up a lot less time, maybe just trying some experiments or looking at the science that we have or know about.
Well, you're going to be duplicating somebody else's experiment probably. And you might want to know about what mistakes they made and what were their results and where were they going.
Okay, so let me jump over to Robert O'Keefe now, who has been patiently waiting. Robert, there you are. Let me ask you to unmute, sir.
There we go. Yeah, this is more a question for the whole group. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for letting me join the forum.
Oh, can you share your camera on, Robert? I'm sorry about that.
Sorry.
Can you talk a little clearer too? My hearing isn't very good.
Okay. There we go. Hopefully. Right. Yeah. Firstly, this is just more aimed at the whole group. I'd like to thank everyone to let us become part of the forum. Another one of our team members from Tachyon Aerospace is on the call. Richard Price, his name's come up as Mr. Heat Exchange. But the question that I've got that I've never understood is, why is it so important that we need a handful of people in government, whether it's the US government, the UK government, to validate what we all already know? I assume that everybody on here has either seen or experienced a UFO sighting or even interactions, and everybody on here is for the purpose of working together to solve the anti-gravity problems, understanding how these craft fly. So the question really is, why is it so important that a handful of people in government validate what we already know?
Well, the question is, like Einstein and Oppenheimer said, we got to keep this to ourselves. There's a lot of rumors about some agreements that were made. And the agreements involve people like Truman and Eisenhower. And I'm surprised that that document did not mention that. So the question too is that what will we be doing if we're agreeing with a species different from us, and what do we expect to get out of them, and what would they expect to give? And one of the things here was that the payoff was that they would be allowed to abduct human beings. When people are abducted, they're usually abducted at rates from cycles that can be 3 to 7 years. In other words, if you're 7 years old, you're getting abducted, you get abducted 17, 14, and then 21, and then 28. And this may involve a birth. And what they do, the girls would do, is that just before they have a month or two of being pregnant, they get abducted again, and so on. And apparently they went too far. They were doing too much of it, and people were beginning to bitch about it. Like, hey, I think I got raped and stuff like this. And the question is, what value were these species getting from us? Now, one point of view was that they're interested in mankind because we have emotionality. They don't know how to deal with emotions. Okay. But, is that enough to say you're going to do your thing to my civilization? And likewise, were they trying to look at us as a farmer does, who husbands a farm? Yeah. And I don't know what to say.
Well, Paul, if I could jump back in really quick, one of the things you had touched on it towards the end of your presentation, you had touched on the Navy UAP sightings. And it appears that what we call the tic-tac, right? These happened over a period of years. There were 2004 and then 2015, two separate series of sightings. To my eyes, these look like different craft. And I'm wondering if you could touch on that. One of the things, this is just me as an individual, but the idea that, I guess the idea that beings are here from another world that's a lot to accept, right, for most of us. And then the idea that multiple different species or races or whatever you might call them are here, that I struggle with. And yet that's kind of what it appears. And with your photos, it showed even more variability. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, to begin with, I'm suspicious that they show one vehicle with a dimension. If there were two other vehicles, what are those dimensions? What are those dimensions? I have to assume that all three of them had the same size and maybe the same craft. Either that or somebody didn't make any measurements.
Okay. So let me see who has questions next. I think I've worked through. I may have lost track of things here.
I think Ron Kita has his hand up.
Oh, okay.
A tough question. Ron, give me a break.
Oh, Ron, where you at?
I'm here.
Okay.
Okay. The question is, I'm saving Paul. He knows where I live. I know where he lives, near Wolf Trap. But anyhow, my question is to Jeremy. He intrigued me with working with mercury. The thing is, instead of trying to dissolve barium titanate into mercury, if you make a mixture of barium titanate and then freeze the barium titanate into the mercury, that way you can spin it. And if you want to take the mercury off, what it is, Mercury freezes at minus 38 degrees C, which is in the realm of dry ice. So you can simply take an amalgam, it's not amalgam, I'm sorry, a mixture of barium titanate powder. The thing is, there's a density problem. The mercury is probably, 3 times more dense than barium titanate. If you chill the barium titanate and slowly drop the chilled barium titanate into the mercury, you can get it to disperse without being through the material. And then if he wants to, if you can afford the liquid helium, you can take the mercury down to being superconductive. So that might be, I don't know if he considered that. It was just, I was looking at the freezing point of mercury, and it's the freezing point of mercury is dry ice. Is Jeremy there?
Ron, you
Yeah.
always seem to scare me.
Sounds like you've done this before. No. No,
But you have to like vibrate it or something to get the barium titanate in. It's a lot more than 3 times the density. It's very, very dense.
Yeah, but what it is, if you chill it and drop it in, you can stratify it.
Oh, okay. So you're saying layers? And,
Yeah, you can get the layers out of it, and then you have something you can spin mechanically. You don't have to spin it using a mercury thing. Also, it is that mercury is one of my friend Henry Wallace's metal. You can spin it mechanically, and then if you want to take it all the way down to superconductive liquid helium temperatures, you have a barium titanate mercury superconductor, which I don't think anybody has ever done that. But I wouldn't try it myself.
If I could ask, sorry, let me jump in just for folks who are kind of uninitiated in this. What is the purpose of adding barium titanate to mercury? As I remember, barium titanate is a high K dielectric, right? Is there any other property to it?
It's got nice electric properties.
Yeah, the goal would probably be to layer it, like we said, and tune the layers to high frequency gravitational wavelengths, so that we can basically create a gravity wave phase conjugate mirror. Is essentially barium titanate in the right type of crystal arrangements can be used to make these things called phase conjugate mirrors, which I was showing and talking about another video of mine.
In vapor deposition territory, though, it's extremely thin, right?
So this is one theory where I have, of how the, on it, but
You're not going to get mercury down that thin of a layer if you're just pouring it and freezing it. It goes like 1/4 of an inch. It's very uncontrollable with the freezing system, because the surface tension of it sort of pulls it together.
Okay. So if you're creating a phase, and we're going a little bit off track, but if you're trying to create a phase conjugate mirror using barium titanate for gravitational waves, would you need mercury involved with that? Could you use the barium titanate by itself? You just mentioned using vapor depth, or you could use like electron beam depth for it or something like that. Perhaps you could do that without having to try and work with mercury.
So what you're suggesting is using the mercury by itself, the titanate by itself, and then combining both of them for the 3rd time. That would be a very nice experiment.
Or potentially another idea might be, if you're using the mercury for some kind of a rotating magnetic field, what if you could vapor depth the barium titanate onto the surface of like a YBCO superconductor, right? And the advantage there would be you would have a solid that you could work with for this. You might be able to reflect some of those gravitational waves, maybe amplify the gravitomagnetic force or something along those lines. And I think that was something David Chester, perhaps someone had talked about, was with that
right here. Tim, can you see that?
Yeah.
That's mercury with barium titanate, just so you get an idea.
Yes. Titanium has a very white, it's used in a white dyes. That's just a natural color of the element and things and compounds that are made with titanium. There was something I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Wagan was someone I came across in the Disclosure Project. He was one of the witnesses from the Disclosure Project that described being on a crash scene in South America where a UFO was leaking a liquid metal, and he said that it would look purple or green depending on which way you looked at it, like, you know, kind of like the iridescence you see on an oil sheen. So I was, you know, also curious about that, because it seems to be like maybe there is a liquid mercury metal that's involved in this propulsion system. And, you know, the Germans mentioned red mercury, and now we're talking about, you know, this, you know, Serum 525. That was the Germans allegedly called it under the Project Reese thing. So I don't know. It's interesting. I think that, you know, the tunnels were dynamited shot to destroy the projects at Project Reese. There might be some value in trying to excavate the tunnel systems, but who knows how deep underground they went and what damage the dynamite, you know, how much they packed the things full of dynamite, you know, it's who knows.
Can I add something here regarding the Potter system, where you got these spheres rotating around on this ring? It's not really a ring, it's a tube, and there's a liquid in there. They claim there's a liquid in there. So this might be the green stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, you know, and it actually, if I could jump in as well, and again, I'm moderating, so I shouldn't be adding as much as I am, but I've read numerous reports of UAPs, UFOs, whatever you might call them, leaking metal. I've read probably 3 or 4 different descriptions of this. Again, that it could be mythology, you know, there's no way to verify that claim. One that comes to mind was actually a supposed crash on Decatur Island. And the reason that stuck in my head is that's near where I live. And this was back in the 1950s, I think. And supposedly, supposedly this craft had trouble, and it had liquid metal leak all over the beach. And then the actual report of it was, I believe this was an Air Force officer who was sent there to collect all this stuff and box it up. So,
well, the other thing too is that all these crafts seem to be going through malfunctions left and right, and something is going on that we don't understand. You know, one of the comments somebody made about inertia leakage, well, that sort of we heard a lot too with the ARV. You know, you're going fast, you're doing something, and sometimes your plumbing doesn't work right. And if you look at that Potter system, that's pretty damn complex. Even the ARV idea is pretty complex. So, you know, what's going on?
well,
They don't have good quality control, or
one of
they don't care about these people. For example, one of the comments made by hybridization, where they had the babies stored in the UFO, they were in a blue canister, a liquid. Well, what kind of liquid would you have that's blue? It's copper. And why would you do that? Well, you would want to kill the electric field around it. So these guys might be biological robots, and they're designed to die. And they're willing to accept those differences. And if you look at all those crashes all over the world, man, could you afford to do that if you were one country versus another? That's ridiculous. So the approach here that these creatures might be using is that it's more important to get knowledge about mankind than it is to survive.
Yeah. Now let me go back to Sean. Sean, you had your hand up a moment ago, and did you have a question? Okay.
Yeah, I did. I was going to ask you. I believe they're also biological androids. A lot of them are, anyways. That we see in these photos and videos. I believe they're androids working out long distance, or maybe even on Earth. Who knows? It could be all just a charade, and that they just use them because they don't go through any they're somehow prevented from radioactivity that these craft give off, and when they first started grading them. That's my belief anyways. And then once they perfected the propulsion device that won't kill a human, they just started boarding them and using them. But that's just a theory.
Okay. Let me see. So Sean, what was your question for? Did you?
Oh
have a
yeah,
question
my question. Sorry, my question was: Did he have the similar thoughts on that? My bad.
Is this for me?
Yeah.
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 Similar thoughts as what? I'm sorry.
Sorry, if these were like like you were talking about how they're biological androids and stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Did you
The
think?
reason I say this is that with the abductions, you have 6 little guys and 1 big guy, and it seems like everybody knows what they're doing, and they're not doing anything else but what they're doing. And that's to take part of getting an abduction to go, get them to the spacecraft, do the things in the spacecraft, and then bring them back. And there's no interaction. I mean, if you went out with an animal and the animal was in pain and anguish, you'd feel sorry, like, gee, did I break its leg, or how do I stop it? These creatures don't give a damn. In other words, we're going to give you an operation without any anesthesia. And we're going to, part of the experiment is see how much pain you can have. This, being abducted is not a pleasurable event. So these guys have an agenda. It's defined what they're going to be doing. And it's not, like I said, it's not a pleasurable event where, hey, I'm going to sit down with these guys in the spacecraft, like Steve Greer. I'm going to sit down and say, hey, guys, what are you doing? And what can I do? That ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So they have to act. They seem to be repeating themselves as if it's robotic. So that's why I would say that. Now, the other question, too, is when these guys die, hey, it's okay I die because that means I get a new shell. What does that mean? Hard to tell.
Okay, well, Paul, thank you. We are just about out of time. So our next session, before we go over to Mark Sokol, I want everyone to give Paul an enormous hand for an extraordinary and extraordinarily long presentation and Q&A session. Sir, thank you very much for putting that together for all of us. I sincerely appreciate it. Okay. Okay, so let me go put it on gallery view. And again, I'm not going to unmute. Let me see. Let me mute everybody out. Okay, so everyone, let's put our hands together for Paul. Thank you, sir.